Hello, and welcome to Just Keep Writing,
a podcast for writers
by writers
to keep you writing.
I'm Marshall.
I'm Nick.
I'm Brent.
And I'm Will.
And joining us this week is Cassandra Westlake. Cassandra, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
Well, thank you for jumping on. This is our last week of our Pride episodes for June 2023. I've felt very impressed that we should bring you on, as me, you, and Marshall will be graduating in August together with our MFAs as well.
Woohoo! Yeah, so we've known Cassandra for a while, and we can't wait to finish up this program. And I'm just super stoked to have you. So welcome. We've been talking about writing for over 2 years now, and it's just cool to have you. So thanks for coming.
Oh, I'm very excited to be here. I like talking writing.
Oh yeah, and we'll be doing it. Okay, so we know you, as we've said, Cassandra, but just can you give our listeners just a brief, just introduce yourself, who you are, and what you're about?
Yeah, my name is Cassandra. I'm a writer out of Seattle. Enjoying my time at the Western Colorado University graduate program with Nick and Marshall. I mostly write speculative YA stuff, but I kind of do a little bit of everything beyond that. The Western Colorado program is very broad in its genre choices, and so that's what I write. A little bit of everything, but mostly YA speculative.
Nice. Will, I'm going to turn over the typical deal to you, if you don't mind, sir.
Thank you so much.
This is going to be fun.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Marshall. Nick, don't interrupt me. And here we go. Cassandra, I want you to describe your writing career in 3 words that can be completely unrelated. And if you get nervous about thinking of career, especially since you're finishing up your MFA, think of it just as your writing journey. 3 words. What are they?
Divided, fun, and creative.
Amazing.
Nice.
So let's break down the first word, divided.
Okay, well, I'm actually pretty new to the writing thing. I'm not one of those people who, has been writing since I was 3, although I did do a little bit of storytelling in my youth. I actually diverted off and did technology for most of my career, programming. So right now I'm doing that in the video game and virtual reality industry. But about 14 years ago, I decided I wanted to go back and do some storytelling, and dusted off my keyboard and just started putting words into my word processor.
Amazing. And what about creative? Why that word?
She said fun first, though.
Yeah, I did say fun first.
Okay. Oh, I'm just going by what Nick wrote, actually. We can do either one.
My bad.
Nick wrote it down wrong in the chat, by the way. I'm not cutting this out. All right, so let's go to fun first, then creative.
All right, so fun and creative are actually kind of related to me.
Cool.
Surprisingly enough. I wanted some balance between my technical work and sort of the other side of my brain. And so I wanted that to achieve more fun in life. The balance is really what I was seeking. And so when I started producing stories, started getting involved in all these worlds that we get to create, I really grasped onto that as a source of enjoyment and play.
I love that. Nick?
Well, I wanted to break this up into kind of 3 different conversations all at once. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about the beginning of your journey. I'm really big into self-motivation, understanding the why behind we do things as people, as writers, and things like that. So I kind of want to break that into with you on that one. So obviously you just talked about being in the technical field and things like that, and recently picking up writing in the last few years. but I want to know because I know your stories are very distinctive in voice and you cover very specific topics from very specific points of view. I've read your stuff for 2 years now. I want the world to know this. What is your why? Why do you write the stories that you write, and why is it so important to write and tell those stories?
I mean, this is a little cliche at this point, but there are a lot of people out there who just aren't heard and don't see themselves in fiction. And I really want to show, queer kids, for instance, queer young people. They don't see themselves in fiction for themselves. They may see themselves in fiction written for the general population, but there aren't that many stories written by queer people, for queer people, about queer people. And I want to actually do that. I want to bring those stories to those young people who need to see themselves.
Will's going to talk first, but go ahead.
Thank you so much for that segue. Nick, Cassandra, let's talk about writing for queer kids. I want to ask you about your own journey as a queer person. I mentioned this in one of the episodes that have not been released yet, but I write a lot of times for myself when I was a kid. And I'm wondering, is it in your journey that when you talk about having representation for queer kids, are you writing stuff that you wanted to see yourself in when you were a kid?
Yeah, actually, that I resonate with that pretty well. I didn't have anything out there. I was very closeted as a kid. There was no representation beyond jokes or horror stories or what have you. And so I didn't see people like me. And that kind of kept me closeted for a very long time. And I could have really used that. That would have helped me have more of my life as opposed to a life that was in the closet.
So when you're writing your stories and you're thinking about, when you were young, do you feel like it's been healing for you to actually write these queer stories for young adults? Or do you feel like it's been cathartic? And it can be both too, but I'm just wondering.
Yeah. I think it's more cathartic at this point. I mean, I altered my life journey about 20 years ago, so it's been a while. So at this point, it is a sense of catharsis that I get through writing these stories, and it's a sense of wanting to pay it forward for the people who helped me 20 years ago. I want to help the kids who are dealing with stuff now.
Oh, I like that. I now know one of your characters a little bit better. Marshall?
No, I don't know. I think this is one of the reasons why we do these episodes weekly in June and talk to queer authors. I think this is what you're saying is exactly why. I mean, I'm everybody knows I teach high school. I deal with teenagers and young people every day. And I try to support the queer students on campus as much as I possibly can, make sure that they know that my room is safe, that I'm a safe person they can come to, and that kind of thing. But as far as seeing themselves, I want more of that. And so I just love that we have queer authors, as hosts on this show, and we do this all month. And I just love that we're having this conversation for my queer kids and everything else that's going on in my life with my students, and that kind of thing. So I'm super stoked to have this conversation. I don't have a question. I just wanted to say that before we got too deep into it, because I just appreciate what my kids and my students will be able to consume in the future. It makes me excited for them, so they don't have to deal with what you all have had to deal with as yeah. Go ahead, Will.
Well, I think, yeah, I want to talk about, like, then, like, as a queer kid, Cassandra, were there stories that you gravitated towards, that you were like, you tried to find yourself in it? Because I feel like, and Brent, I don't know, you can jump in on this too. Like, I felt like I was Buffy a lot of times. Okay. Because, I was blonde and super attractive and I could roundhouse people. Okay. So I like injected myself into those stories.
I love
So
it.
like, I'm just wondering, did you also, even if you didn't see queer characters, did you notice things that were queer coded, or did you like envision yourself being those characters?
So I'm a little bit older. You may not realize that, but I remember going back when I was a kid watching Saturday morning cartoons when those were a thing. Watching a show called Electro Woman and Dyna Girl. And I wanted to be them. They had this cool car. They had these really cool adventures. They're a superhero duo from the 70s. And yes, I am that old. But I remember wanting to be them. And they were kind of an early version of Xena and Gabrielle. But futuristic. So they were, I think, they're the ones that stick out in my mind. It's sort of the catalyst that got me like realizing I was different.
Yeah, Brent, did you have anyone that you like identified was like, oh yeah?
I'm trying to think. I didn't have one I necessarily like identified with, but I had people that I wanted. Yeah. So
give us names.
I mean, well, for me, it was always the X-Men and how they had that found family, which is such a queer concept, right? And I always wanted that. I always wanted to like have that, people that chose you and they loved you because they chose you, and they all like, had this bond. And so I think, I think it's safe to say I feel like I have that now in my life. But as a kid, like I wanted that because I didn't feel like, and not no knock against my immediate family because I love them to death, but it was just there was something that they couldn't understand, and I felt like when I saw these characters, they all had something that their loved ones couldn't understand, but they found these group of people that could understand. And yeah, so I think that was something I was always drawn to as a kid.
Yeah, and I think, and I think as queer people, especially from the three of us going through different stages and like different, timelines of growing up, it's really only been the last 10 years that queer kids are having cartoons just with queer characters existing. And so for us, I mean, Cassandra, I'm going to ask you this question. What is it like now seeing the media kind of embrace that, and how is it affecting your art personally?
I love that the media is starting to produce some queer characters, like in cartoons, like in the Owl House, for instance. There are a few others, but and that actually kind of motivates me. It gives me hope that there are people who are able to create and get their work out there in front of the eyes of the people who really need to see themselves. So, when I watch those, I often get writing.
I know, for me, like watching She-Ra was like a really big. It was just really cool how She-Ra played out, and I still, there's tons of room where it needs to grow, right? Like I want to see a cartoon with queer men of color be able to fall in love and have crushes, because I don't think you see that yet. And we need to have that happen. And also trans kids having that adventure and the prom and everything else. Like we so need that. Go ahead, Marshall. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I was just gonna say, like I said, raising my very young children and my youngest being trans, like watching these shows like Steven Universe and She-Ra, and like, I mean, I don't know, it was just, and there's so much more than that, and it's not just animated stuff. We've been consuming a lot just as a family, but I look over at my kids when we're watching certain things, and I can see when they see themselves, and I love it. It's I mean, that's what creativity and all this stuff we're trying to do is for, right? And I think it's awesome. So I couldn't not say Steven Universe and She-Ra, though. Steven Universe was awesome. But anyway, Nick, go ahead.
So I love all these questions, and this is really getting to the root of like the beginning stages for you. But I want to kind of advance the timeline a little bit, right? And I want to know, before we jump into getting into Western Colorado to start your MFA, what are the things that inspire you right now to tell the stories you want to tell?
Well, I mean, it's the look in the kids' faces when you see them consume this kind of media. The joy that you hear, like on TikTok or Twitter, that's inspiring. But there's also the other side of it. The world right now is getting more and more hostile, for trans kids and, even trans adults. And that kind of lights a fire under me. That, I have a little bit of the frustration and anger, but I'm trying to channel that into something positive to give, to show that people can overcome some of these sort of negative aspects of our lives, and that they can succeed and be themselves. And so that's a big part of what pushes me as well.
Now, we talked a little bit about genre and things like that. When it comes to your current writings, we're sticking to the YA speculative version of that. But do you feel like there's like a specific genre right now that speaks more to the youth that you found that you want to write in more?
I mean, there's being a trans kid in the world, and seeing successes and stuff like that. I think there is some contemporary literature that can do that, giving a positive view. But we all like a good adventure story. We all like a good, space lasers and dragons and and all that. We all want to fly the spaceships.
Well, it goes into what we kind of talked about off show here, Cassandra, and Brent and Marshall have talked about this. Sometimes I just want to ride a dragon. I just want to fly a spaceship. I feel like this is in the same vein, right? And maybe, Will, you can speak to this too, but you just want to write stories and read stories and just be on an adventure.
Mm-hmm.
Love that. The decision to get your MFA, what sparked that, and why Western Colorado?
Well, I had been writing for a while, improving my craft. I'd done a few books, two of which will never see the light of day, and two of which I would like to put some energy back into them to up them now that I, have learned a lot. But I really wanted to accelerate my career. I could have just kept writing, kept reading. But I wanted this sense of acceleration because I'm not getting any younger, and I have lots of stories I want to get out there. So I needed, a kick in the butt.
Yeah. And specifically, why Western? What drew you to Western Colorado?
Okay. Well, I wanted to do a program that was not so literary, but instead genre, popular fiction, maybe kid lit. And I wanted to do a remote program, a limited residency program, because, I have a day job and I have a mortgage to pay and all that kind of stuff. So there's like really only a handful of programs out there that offer that. And so Western was the one that offered the right set of people, the right set of instructors for me. It also helps that I had a friend who, kind of introduced me to Western, who's also in the program. I talked to the director of the genre fiction program, and that really made an impression.
And at the time, that was the wonderful Fran Wild, correct?
That was the wonderful Fran Wild.
And we all love Fran.
Yeah, she totally convinced me.
Yeah, Fran has been on the show, and she may have been on the show and talked to me and Marshall, and lo and behold, here we are.
Yeah.
Now, I want to ask this question. Just it's a learning perspective for me as a cis white guy, right? I want to know, like, did you go in and do research to make sure that this was going to be a safe school and program for queer people?
I think primarily I got a sense from Fran that this would be a safe space, a space where I can like spread my wings. And even after I started, I was still a little shy at first, a little careful until I got to know my cohort, who was like the best cohort ever.
Right?
Right. We have a good cohort. I'm not gonna lie.
We really do.
And the instructors and when I got comfortable, I knew this was the right place. But starting out, I was still a little nervous about that. There were some good things on the campus website or on the school website about diversity and inclusion. I did like that, but it wasn't until I looked up the instructors individually that I really got a sense.
Okay. I love that. I think that's a super important piece that someone like me, I don't think about is this a safe place? It's something that I'm working at to make sure like I don't want to attend or go to places that I know is going to be harmful for my friends. Kind of jumping into your experience at Western Colorado, right? You're there, you started, and we kind of get hit right away with not being able to write in our own genres, reading and writing and Westerns and romances, which none of us had done. Kind of walk me through like your experience there and let me back up. What was your impression that first semester on how the rest of this year was going to go in the areas of your growth?
Well, the thing that struck me was not even the first semester, but like the first day or two. We were told pencils down, stop working on your existing projects. And that I found freeing. Basically, you clear the slate, open your mind to like any new stuff, new genres, new everything. Everything was open at that point. And it was hard to give up existing projects. But that, pencils down thing was just amazing. For me, at least.
Yeah. No, without a doubt. And you've obviously written a ton since you've been in the program. In what area do you feel like you've grown the most that surprised you from this program?
I'm pretty proud of some of the romance work that I've done. I have one story about a Weimar Republic trans woman who falls in love with a English writer. And, that was it was a stretch for me doing the romance part. And it really just kind of clicked when I did that. So now I'm trying to up my game as far as including romance in all of my stories.
I like that. Go ahead.
I'm gonna throw this out there because you're right, Cassandra. Our cohort rocks, and everybody's really good at their craft. I found. I'm not gonna say I'm playing favorites here, but your stuff was one of my favorites to read the entire 2 years. It was just one of those things where I'm like, oh, I got to read Cassandra's stuff. Oh, I'm ready. I can't wait. But the point is like, I cannot wait to see. I was honestly, and the reason I started saying all of this was I was a little bummed that we weren't paired up last summer.
Mm-hmm.
That I didn't get to read your outline and your thesis stuff. But that's okay. I'll read it when it's published.
Look, I'll be the one to say that I got to read Cassandra stuff, and I immediately, as soon as you were done with it, I was like, "Well, read this. This is up Will's alley." So Will does have it, in fact, and we'll get to actually talk about that project here at the end as well. I do want to cover that and give you a chance to talk about your thesis process. I really like the romance section there. I felt like I understand romance a lot more than just your typical, oh, it's a love story thing on that one. Now, I want to kind of flip the script and ask Will and Brent a question real quick on this one.
It's time. End of Pride Month. Here we go.
Woo! So I want to know a little bit more about your guys' experience in reading queer romances and where we're lacking as a community with that and where we can be better. Cassandra, this question is for you as well.
Brent, you go first.
Okay.
Actually, I want Will to go first on this one, please.
Oh, all right. Backing off.
Wow. Okay. What is the question? Because all I keep thinking about is that, I got to read Brent's novella, which is not out yet as of this recording. I've read it about 5 times and it's hot.
I saw this coming.
And sexy. And I just can't, I can't.
And I'm actually really glad
it.
we're talking about this because this was supposed to be part of our little rotation this month as well. And nothing against Brent, but I'm glad you're talking about it now, Will, and I'm interrupting you.
I mean, I've read it 5 times.
Give him all the praise.
I've read it 5 times.
It's 5 times?
Yep. Mm-hmm. And I love it. And
do you want me to repeat the question?
Oh, no. I'm just saying how much I loved Brent's romance and the tension in his book, and that you guys haven't read it yet. I don't know what to tell you, but I think there's a couple things that we're missing. I think Brent said this in the past, and I think we don't have enough nuance in queer romance. And that's a lot of times, I think, because we're having people who aren't queer writing them and who are getting the book deals. And I think we need to...
Thank you.
I think we need to have an array of types of romances we see. I think it's super important on a whole to have young adult show positive queer romance. However, I think it would be interesting if we had a series, where we do see queer relationships that are toxic. Because I think as a queer kid, we tend to accept toxic relationships easier than actually love relationships. I think especially for all of our age groups, I think a lot of times because we had all of our elders passed away. There was a huge generation that had passed away. So we didn't have this model of that you can have functional, loving relationships. So I think showing those toxic relationships is important as long as it's deeply balanced with a lot of positivity, because there's a lot of negativity from the world when it comes to that. I think we need to see definitely more trans stories, but I also think we specifically need more trans stories from Black trans authors. And I say that because when you look at the demographics of the people that are being murdered, there is a complete split, and it is Black trans women are being murdered at such more of a higher rate than any other group. And that's for multiple reasons. And I think we need to see romance and stories from Black trans writers. I think a lot of times you see publishers or you see certain people, editors, not going to name any names, who only pick, this is the one queer writer, or this is the one trans writer. And, just like every other human being, my experience as being queer is radically different than Brent's, than Cassandra's. And there are things that overlay, but we all have a unique perspective, and we need more of it. I could write about queer Latin boys every single day, and for every single book. If I came out with 50 books and it would never, ever be enough.
No, well, thank you for answering that. That speaks a lot of volumes. And I love what you mentioned as well. The people that are publishing right now are not queer, and they're very toxic relationships. I'd love to see a change in that as well. I'm going to go to Cassandra on this one, and then you, Brent.
What is the question?
So the question, after Will's long rant,
I love your rant, by the way, Will. I just want you to
I
know
read
that.
Brent's book, and it's really hot and sexy, and you guys haven't read it yet.
So the question is where can we do better as a writing community when it comes to queer romance? What are we missing, and what are we doing well?
Well, there's not very much trans romance out there. Like, so very little, especially adult trans romance. There's a lot of trans erotica that a lot of it is very negative and toxic to trans people, and it's very objectifying. But there's not a lot of trans romance that really feature deep relationships that aren't just about sex, that are full on relationships between people. So I'd love to see more of that. I'll second the complete lack of Black trans women in publishing. There, honestly, I can't think of very many at all. Yeah, I think there are some non-binary trans writers out there, a fair number, but especially trans women, there just are not that many Black trans women.
Go ahead, Will.
Real quick before Brent goes, I also have to say that, to Cassandra's point, there is a lot of wonderful, I don't want to say a lot, there is way more wonderful trans stories for young adults than there are for adults, which I wonder if it's because we have a generation of children that are just, kids are open, and I hope what it does, especially for the young adults who are reading, like, Cemetery Boys, that one pops into my mind right away. I think it's Cafe con Leche that actually has a trans character, which is a YA romance. I might be wrong. There's
Will, real quick.
Yeah.
Who wrote Cemetery Boys?
Aiden Thomas.
Thank you.
Yeah. That, like, hopefully we see more trans stories coming out in the adult spectrum.
And I'll throw something out there, and poor Brent. Just real quick, as far as the stories for the youth, I think that's really important. And I had a point to say. What did you say in the beginning of that, Will?
I wonder if it's because this generation is just so open.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah, so I honestly, I think that this generation, thankfully, is more open. Like my youngest, he goes to Montessori school, and which is great. And there's a whole spectrum of kids, some non-binary kids, trans kids and stuff. But like, even at the high school that I work at, in a small, very conservative, good old boys town, but I've noticed over the years, and I've been teaching in this district for over 15 years, that compared to when we went to school in the 90s, that's for sure. It's the kids are more open, and it's and seeing these stories is only going to help. And I love the fact that I'm just going to share a quick story. My Zoe brought over a couple of friends for his birthday over the weekend, and it was like the cutest little group of like 6th and 7th grade kids, and they're all different, and they're like literally dancing in the garage to Just Dance on the Switch. Like, nobody has ever questioned anything about anybody, and they're open and they're loving, and I love seeing that, considering how horrible growing up in the 90s was in a similar town, and knowing that the queer kids in my class that came out much later, what they had to been going through. So anyway, That's my rant. Brent?
Brent, do you need me to repeat the question?
No. I have solid memory when it comes to things like this. So Will has read my book. But
Wait, I just want to add, I've read it 5 times. I'm going to probably read it again.
How many times?
5.
Was it 5? Okay, just making sure.
Yep, I'm going to read it again.
And I think one of the things that to kind of like answer your question, one of the things I kind of thought about when writing it was like, one of the things that often has kind of bothered me, and I think I've talked about it before, is just how much of the stories of queer men are being written by cis women, particularly cis white women, and how it's always kind of bothered me on some level, and because they miss nuances, they also fundamentally don't understand certain things. I think I've never seen one where, and this is a common thing amongst gay men, where you can have a sexual relationship with somebody and decide it doesn't work, and that person ends up becoming your best friend. And it's totally platonic from that point forward, and you love each other deeply and you may have had sex, I don't know, 2-3 times or whatever in the past, and it's not a huge monumental issue. Whereas I don't think cis heterosexual people can do that, or not, at least not to the degree that we can. And, so nuances like that are that you can, are that a lot of us just hook up. Like, that's just, and it's not, and there's no need to assign a moral judgment to it or to make it, have some statement on, oh, this poor soul that, can't find love, and so they're screwing around. It's not always like that for us. So I think, I wanted to try to talk about those things. And I didn't talk about all of that in the book. I think more than anything, what I talked about in the book, and Will, having read it, can probably jump in and correct me or speak on it, is I think one of the things I wanted to talk about is that our love isn't like, it can be complicated, it can be messy, it could be, and sometimes we have to fight for it a little harder than I think cishet people do, because, and I was thinking of this poem, and I'm going to mess up the poem, it's not quite right, but it's basically saying like, black boy that loves another black boy, be patient with each other because they don't teach love like this, and so I think I think I was trying to embody that a little bit in the novella, with, of course, science fiction, fantasy, all that kind of stuff in the mix. But yeah.
So since we're already talking about it, Will, I'll bring you in here on this one as well. Brent, What is your novella? Will, give us a pitch after he introduces it.
Well, I don't want the episode to become about me, though.
Right, but Unnecessary Chaos is coming out here soon, and you can pre-order from Neon Hemlock. Find the link in the show notes.
Cassandra will be getting her spotlight, so I'm going to make this quick. All right, so the novella is called Unnecessary Chaos. Essentially, if I had to pitch it really fast, it is I would say it's like a really gay, really sexy Mr. and Mrs. Smith, but with, instead of like an action movie, it is very much like a secondary world fantasy. So I would say maybe it's a little bit, I'm trying to think of a good one. This isn't quite, I guess, 100% match, but I think it's a little bit Jade City. It's got a little bit of Max Gladstone DNA in it, maybe in some places, but not as like cerebral, because I'm not anywhere near smart as that man. But yeah, if I had to like throw it out there real quick, I think that's like a quick blah pitch.
We love Max here on the show.
Yes.
Go ahead, Will.
I also want to just go on Brent's thing about when you don't have queer people writing stories. Like, I think all of us who are queer have met straight cishet women who think they're real edgy when they start to talk about like sex or their sexual adventures. And like, I know me and Brent definitely had this just conversation, and it's just kind of like, okay, like, and you're just laughing. You're like, okay, and I just want to be like, girl, like, I live in New York City and I'm a gay single male. Like, okay, like, we give blowjobs as like hellos. I don't know what to tell you.
Handshake.
Yeah, like,
handshake. It's not even like a.
Yeah.
It's not even like a.
Yeah. Like, see a good dick, you just suck it. Like,
Cassandra was asking about cussing earlier. Come on now.
So.
Yeah. it is. I think there's a way to, and I think for a lot of, I think cishet audiences, they don't understand how we can be so overtly sexual and still have this deep love and respect for each other, because a lot of them still associate, I think, sex with shame in a lot of ways. And I saw this thing the other day, which I really, really loved. And it was like, one of the blessings of being queer is that we get to completely recreate ourselves. Like we get to we get to deconstruct the ego, the things that we've been told, the things that we've been said we should believe about ourselves and each other. And we get to really, we really have to examine that, and we get to rebuild ourselves up again. And I think that kind of freedom is something that I think a lot of cishet authors fundamentally don't understand and can't understand, because they haven't had to kind of go through that ego death. I think that a lot of queer people have to go through.
Yeah, I mean, Cassandra, I wonder, like, I think we grew up with like a lot of binaries, right? As queer kids. So don't you feel, I mean, tell me your experience, because everyone's different, but I always felt like to Brent's point, in a lot of ways, we're a lot healthier emotionally, because we had no choice but to do the work on ourselves to create new relationship goals and the way we move through the world. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, actually, I agree strongly with that. For me, yeah, I was living in the closet. I was trying to fit in. I was trying to go through the motions for far too long, just because, this was back in the 80s and 90s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. There weren't options for trans women out there. There were no examples or anything like that. So I did what I could. But when I had my kind of break where I decided I need to look at myself and see who I really am and be who I really am, it kind of struck me. It was kind of an existential crisis. I could spend the rest of my life trying to fulfill the role that everybody else thought I should fulfill, or I could live my life. And that's a frightening proposition, that you would reach the end of your life without ever having lived your life. That's a terrifying proposition. Yeah.
Brent, are you going to say something? Go ahead.
Well, yeah. I was just going to say, I feel like the sad thing is, and I feel like so many people that non-queer people, I think they live like that. They live their lives never actually living for them. And I think, and I've talked about this before, my dad's family's trash, but there's there's a degree, like, but now I'm almost, there's a degree of like pity that I have for them, because I'm like, you know what? Like, the reason I bother you so much is because you think someone like me should have a miserable life, and you see me not having that, and it is driving you insane that I am being a free person and you never have been. And in your world, and in what you've been told, and in the constructs you've been given, that's not how it's supposed to be. And and so now, like, I almost have pity for them.
I'm gonna just piggyback off that real quick, because I feel like all of us are the three of us will find this out as we put work out. My nephew, who's totally straight, like such a boy, right? Like such a man now. He's a man. He's like 28. It's scary. I was a young uncle, everyone, really young, like 7. True story. I have too many sisters. But anyway, he says to me this one day, out of the blue, we're not talking about anything current. We're just like joking around and laughing. I think we were talking about One Piece, honestly. And he says, Uncle Will, you make me feel more free. And I looked at him and I was like, what do you mean? He's like, you make me feel like anything I can do is possible, because everything that you've done was impossible and you still did it anyway.
Yeah. And I think that's our role as not only queer people, but queer creators. Because I think Cassandra even talked about it, like writing these stories and putting them out there for queer kids to see, because, you know, they may not even know that that thing that they're longing for is a possibility, or that it can even exist, you know? Because I think for a lot of us growing up, we thought we were maybe the only one or two that were dealing with what we were dealing with,
Mhm.
and when in fact there was a whole wide world of us out there. So I think that's the beauty of what we're doing, but also like the big responsibility of what we're doing is that, because and Will, you did this to me actually with the novella, when you told me that you had Black queer friends who, like, I didn't know this thing existed.
Mhm.
I felt, I felt privileged, but I also felt this like, whoa, like that wasn't a role I was expecting to take on, but
Yeah.
it's one I want to be responsible with, I guess.
Yeah.
God, I love it. I asked a question about romance, and this is where we are 20 minutes later. This is great.
Right.
Marshall, why do we even have an outline?
Oh, I know why we
guides
have an
themselves.
outline, sir. I know why we have an outline. Okay.
So
yeah, go ahead, dude.
go ahead. No, you got a
Go ahead.
question?
No, because I'm gonna, because otherwise I'll just keep continuing down this road. We need to start winding down, because otherwise.
I know.
Good.
By the time I got you, we got 10 minutes left, right?
Go ahead.
So, Cassandra, didn't get to talk a lot about Western in your MFA experience, but some really good things happened because of it, such as your thesis project, which is the novel that you are currently querying. I wanted to talk a little bit about that project to give you a chance and opportunity to go ahead and pitch it here, because you never know who's listening to the show. Hint, hint, wink, wink. You know, there are people listening that might be interested in it. So give us the pitch.
All right. Well, kind of calls back to what we were just talking about, because it is definitely a queer story. It's a near future young adult sci-fi story. Takes place in a world where, well, if you're queer or neurodivergent or rebellious, you have something implanted in your head that kind of erases all that, and it effectively erases your soul, so that you can be quote unquote normal and fit into that society. Kind of a high-tech conversion therapy kind of a thing. So the story follows a 17-year-old trans girl who's closeted because of this. She's terrified of having this happen to her, and she's forced to take great risks to escape this world into a kind of a Hong Kong-like free trade zone, where she hooks up with a bunch of street kids and has all kinds of adventures, street kid adventures, until the puritanical government and society that was oppressing her kind of catches up, and then she has to fight for her survival. But it's kind of cyberpunk goodness.
I love it.
Yeah.
I've had the privilege to read the outline, read a lot of the project, read some of the finished work. I know it's in Will's hands, so I know we'll rant and rave about it once he gets through it, which will be good. Now, when it comes to what you're currently working on, I know you're putting out there, you're querying it. Give me the big dreams about this. What are your hopes for it? What do you want to accomplish with this novel, and who is your target audience?
All right. I want to get this novel in front of the queer young people who need to see stories like this, who need to see themselves overcome worlds like this. So anything I can do to do that, is good. So I would dream of finding an agent who really gets the story and gets what I'm trying to say here, and finding a publisher who could help me get it into those kids' hands. I don't think it's going to be like necessarily, well, it could be made into a movie. There's sort of an aside thing going on, because I am going into a year of screenwriting. So Nice. It might be made into a script.
I mean, I definitely can see this as a movie, 100%. I think, like Charlie Jane Anders got her young adult trilogy optioned from Michael B. Jordan. Like
That's awesome.
Oh, wow.
I can see your story in a theater, in TV.
Yeah.
Like I can definitely see it.
I was
It has
thinking,
those
short
qualities.
10-episode TV show or something would be
Yeah.
sick too. I don't know. When you publish this, Cassandra, I will put it on my list of things I want to teach my students, like just books that my kids should read, because I just think what we've been talking about tonight and this project in particular, since I've been following since the beginning, obviously, but I think it's super important that these stories are told. So I wish you the best of luck, but I assume everybody else does as well.
Yeah, of course, Marshall.
Of
Could
course.
you imagine we would be like
I didn't
now?
want to speak for you guys.
Like,
Yeah. Imagine like no other queer
Yeah.
writers. There's only one Highlander.
Exactly.
the
Exactly.
only one.
There's only one.
So we do need to start winding this down, but we have a couple questions we always ask towards the end. But before we get to those, I just have one more. What is besides, I know you're querying the novel. I know I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and I know Nick has been as well. I guess your journey's a little different than ours, though, because you're doing one more year in screenwriting. But what are your plans for post-grad school, whether it be this program or screenwriting when you're done with that one?
Well, as of this summer, I'm going to continue to query this book and try to get it out there. It's kind of frightening that, either I have some difficulty doing that, or even scarier, I have success, because then I have grad school, another year of it, along with edits from a publisher, edits from an agent, and all that. So there'll be a lot of coffee involved. Yeah, there'll be a lot of coffee involved, but I'm up to that challenge.
You got this.
And then after my next year in screenwriting, I would like to have a nice mix of being able to churn out maybe a sequel or two to this project, my thesis project, but also maybe some indie screenplays. I think that would be a lot of fun as well. And I'm also looking at sort of a slight daytime job shift into narrative design for video games, because I can kind of fold what I've learned with the technical skills I have to kind of bring stories to that platform as well.
Oh, it's awesome. It's always been a dream of mine to write. I'm a big gamer. I've always wanted to write for games. I just tell me what you're working on when you get there, because I can't wait. All right. So second to last question. If you want people to find you on the internet or social medias, or if you have a website coming, that kind of thing, I can put in the show notes, or I can skip this part altogether. But if you want people to find you on the internet, where can they find you? All
right. Well, I'm still kind of setting up my website, but it'll be CassandraWestlake.com.
Nice.
It's kind of a template version there right now, but over the next few weeks, I got some good stuff coming.
Sweet.
And hopefully a link to this program.
Awesome. And Brent, we're gonna throw it to you. You get the last question, buddy.
I get the last question of the Pride Month episodes. This is cool. So we always ask this: what keeps you writing?
What keeps me writing? Coffee. Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's truth to that. I really enjoy writing in coffee shops. I know it's cliche, the author or screenwriter sitting in the coffee shop tapping away, but what keeps me writing? I got stories in my head and I need to get them out. And I know, like, everybody probably says that, but I got stories that there are people out there that I want them to hear those stories, because I think they will help people.
I love that answer, because you really do think about your audience. And I know a lot of times we're told not to, but it's hard when you're marginalized not to think of that in a non-egotistical way.
Well, yeah. And I think the people who can say don't think about it are able to say that from a very privileged place. So, yeah.
Great
Well,
end.
I don't know. We can't thank you enough, and we'll have you back. Whenever we can, and I can't wait to see you in
6 weeks, baby.
6 weeks or so to finish up this program, or at least our portion. You're going to continue, but thank you, Cassandra, for joining us, and we'll have to do this again soon.
And this has been Just Keep Writing, a podcast for writers, by writers, to keep you writing. You can find us at justkeepwriting.org. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Feel free to reach out to any of us on our social medias, and please jump in our Just Keep Writing Discord channel. Links to all of that is in the show notes. Lastly, please support our show by going to patreon.com/justkeepwriting. We offer daily writing prompts, early access to podcast episodes, and much more. Thanks for listening, and just keep writing.